Hello and good evening, guys, and welcome back to our solo series, A Conversation on Mental Health. And tonight we're going to be touching on grief and loss. I'm just going to give a little time as everyone joins us. Tonight I have with me, well, your host, I'm Shawn Nicholas, and next to me I have my good co-host from our regular podcast stream, Common Courtesy, Angelique Young.
Hello, hello, hello.
And next to her is our very special guest, Clarissa. Clarissa, how are
Hi.
you?
Hi, I'm good. How about yourself? I'm doing well.
I'm doing well as well. Thank you for being here. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we're here to have this conversation together. So tell me a little bit about yourself because I just heard you're getting out of class. Before we get into the conversation, because before you got here, we've been talking about depression and mental health and how that affects things and things like that. Like I last week I talked about working on my alcoholism, and the week before Angelique talked about suicide. So like let's before we get into all of those things, I wanted to ask you. So like, what are you studying in school?
I am actually going to school to be a language pathologist, and I've been doing that for quite some time. I started right out of high school, but I've just been taking my time, kind of taking courses here and there. I'm finally graduating this semester with my bachelor's, so I'm excited for that for sure.
That's so awesome. Like I see, I love people who are very, passionate about their lives and what they're doing. Like, so let's get into this. So Angelique introduced me to you in the chat, and you wanted to speak about how depression affects. I mean, sorry, you wanted to speak how grief affects depression, and we were talking backstage. Hey, Nicole. We were talking backstage how grief and loss is something that you're second nature to.
Yes. So grief has just like lost. I think I could go back to when I was maybe in middle school, eighth grade maybe. That I experienced my first loss. My uncle passed away. Um, that one, it was just very new to me. I didn't really know how to feel. It was very like, I don't know. It was just like very new. So it was kind of like I don't know how to feel. Like I remember being mad at God. Like I didn't know how to deal with it at that point. And then my second like big loss was probably um my junior year of high school. My dad's dad passed away, and that was another both instances. They were in the hospital, and like I had to process seeing them like with ventilators and all that. So all that I think plays a part in like the grieving process as well, because like you don't know, like you've never it's just it's hard to explain. Like I don't know. But after that, my what was it? I've had three really, really big significant losses in my life. It's been my uncle, my 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 dad's dad, and then also my mom's dad. And that was the most recent, the one that hit me the hardest. So it's kind of like been back to back, and obviously other more important people too. But those were like my three significant ones that I've dealt with.
And would you say like after this, like after those losses, it kind of drove you into a state of depression and mental health issues?
Most definitely. The first two I was fairly young, so I kind of like I remember being sad. I remember like just kind of like the typical like I lost someone. But I actually felt my mom's dad j- just differently in a way. Not that I loved him more or loved the other ones less. It's just the loss was just more real in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I did in that sense. And when my grandpa passed, my mom's dad, he he was very close. He was like a second dad to me. So that I did spiral into a depression, and it was difficult.
I just wanted to read what my friend Nicole says. She says their spirit is with you always. Know that, beautiful, and you are a
Thank
beautiful
you for
soul.
that. I
Like,
appreciate it so
as
much.
you're a beautiful soul, as I'm talking to you, I'm feeling, you know, all these emotions. So, because there's all types of loss that we deal with. You know what I mean? Like, not just people, but you were just saying. I mean, not just people. There could be like, loss of jobs or friends who you no longer talk to. I talked about that last week, but just dealing with this, Clarissa, just a little bit more. Um, were there? I'm sorry, I'm afraid to ask this. Were there things? Were there ways that like you reacted to these? Like, were there negative ways? Like, were you? Was there like a spiral out of
Like
control?
it was more so like I kind of didn't care. It's more so with my grandpa, my most recent loss back in 2020. Um, it was more so like I didn't really care what was going on. I was just in bed mostly, just, and especially since the pandemic hit, it was like very hard to process those emotions. So that didn't help the depression either. So I didn't do any like like acts of like self-harm or anything like that, but I did like I just it was kind of like I was numb in a way, because I didn't even cry at that point. Like it was just so like I couldn't, it was hard to feel those emotions at the time, um when it was more recent.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Angelique. Angelique, do you have any questions? And
No, just relatability, really. This topic is near and dear to me. I am somebody who also, like Clarissa's, experienced a lot of grief in my life throughout my entire life, like unimaginable, things that people either only see in movies, or things that people only experience, through like storytelling. Like it kind of happened. I don't know what it was in the universe or how I got dealt these cards, but I've always had to deal with the unexpected loss of people and things like that. And so I think at first you don't really understand it. You don't grasp the concept of what this loss is, in terms of like losing someone. And then as you become an adult and you start to realize exactly what it means to lose someone, and that the things you loved never come back, right? You start to realize that the hugs, the kisses, the cute messages, the nicknames, the gifts, the thoughtfulness of it, right? And so I think we hyper focus on what we're no longer getting. And that hyper focus causes you to feel a lot of sadness. It causes you to feel a lot of thoughts of, what we consider depression. It's like it puts you in a state of missing. It
mm-hmm.
puts you in a state of want and need for something you feel you can no longer get or achieve, right? So this can cause us to kind of feel down about it, and you tend to like the initial, like I call it, like the blanket level depression is, the I want to stay in bed, the not wanting to eat, the not wanting to, you can barely sleep, or you oversleep. You tend to fall into a comfort that allows you to kind of make time move faster. You don't necessarily want to be gone, but you don't want to be here, right? And so that's how it initially starts off, and then the next thing you know, a week, 2 weeks, a month has gone by, and you're realizing that life is not you're not moving forward, kind of deal. And so that kind of loss can really affect you if you don't have a good mental place on what loss is, and what how to address grief. I think everybody has to realize that grief is something we feel whether we want it or not, right?
Right.
You don't get the opportunity to say, I don't want to grieve today. You can put it off, but literally, by definition, there are 7 stages of grief you feel when you lose someone. So I mean, it's the denial, it's the anger, it's the regret, it's all these different things that start to come out of that, and you kind of put yourself in a position to deal with them in your own way. And I think what people need to understand about grief and loss is that it's not linear. It's not like I'm going to cry today and I'm going to cry for 6 months and then I'm going to be out of it. No, it comes in waves. It comes and goes. It goes left, it goes right, it goes under, it goes away, it comes back. It never really leaves you to an extent. You just learn how to deal with it a little bit better each time. And
Right.
so I think to give everybody like a kind of basis of where this is like the biggest probably loss I could say that I've ever felt in my life. Like outside of just recently losing my stepfather, who was actually like the best dad I ever had. Um, this past May, I you realize before that, I think if I had not gone through all the grief that I went through in my life up until that point, I think that this would have been super, super hard for me to handle. I think even though I didn't handle it my best, I think it definitely prepared me for what this was. And I think the first time I ever experienced a loss was probably like one of my grandfathers, somebody who was like close to me and I was young. I really like, that person that always cheers you up. And it's kind of typical, right? You always lose the older people in your family first.
Right.
Most people.
Hopefully.
And yeah, for most people, right? That's like the 80-20 rule. But I that was the thing. And so I started to realize that the older people in my life don't live a lot longer. So I started to focus my attention into spending as much time with them as I can when I became cognizant, because I was like, oh, I want to be around these people because I don't know how much time I have, right?
Mhm.
I remember when I was in high school, my high school sweetheart, like we were very much in love, and he caught me by surprise. I never thought in a million years that that would happen. Up until him, I had dated girls, and um, I think to a certain extent, like I just had always known that I had love for this person, and um, losing him was a complete and total utter shock to me. Like we were talking one day, it was his birthday, and we were picking out tuxedos for prom, and then I got a call one Saturday morning that he was gone in a car accident. And
Mm.
that loss was epic for me. It was the first time I had ever felt a personal level of. It was the first time I had ever had somebody who, you know, um, I confided in this person in ways I had never confided in a human being, not even my best friends. I had shared intimacy with this person. This person was my first for everything. Um, in that aspect. And so I think when that happened initially, like I literally was beside myself. You couldn't tell me anything. Like I wanted to prove it wrong so badly, that depression, that spiral. Um, After getting through everything, and even after the funeral, I remember packing up my life and moving to New York City. And I stayed there for about a year. And I remember my whole year there being a blur. I lived with a family member and I used to like walk to work and hang out with my cousin every once in a while, but I literally didn't have a life. I didn't live. And then I moved to Pittsburgh for school. And my whole first year in school, I did not talk to people. I didn't want to date. I didn't want to be around people. I barely made friends. I had 5 friends my whole first year. Um, I still talk to all of them, but like that was my life. I really took everyone out the picture, and I showed up for holidays, and I did the part, but inside I was a shell of a person. I literally walked through the motions and did what I had to do because, the reality I had learned is that life doesn't stop when someone dies. You still have bills to pay, you still have
Mhm.
responsibilities, you still have to keep yourself together. If not for you, for the people around you who are not able to hold themselves up. And so you deal with it the best you can. But I think at that point, I didn't know how to talk about it yet. I didn't
Right.
understand that I needed to talk about how I was feeling to address the whole thing. I think we have to do it single handedly. Like there's a motion that says you're responsible for your own shit. You have to
Hmm.
hold your own shit and you have to do it, but that's not necessarily true. Talking to someone about it doesn't change the fact that you're handling. We're not shoveling it onto someone else. We're expressing it. We're letting it out. And I think that while writing in a journal helped, I really didn't get help until I was like halfway through school and I started seeing a counselor, and that changed my whole life. Being able to talk about this grief, what I felt, what I experienced in that time, like it was a lot of shed tears that I didn't want to dredge up. Once you've buried a grief, you don't want to trudge it up. It doesn't matter how many times you visit the gravestone. You don't want to dig up the body, right? Even that there's something you forgot to put in there, or you forgot to take from them on the way out. Once it's done in your mind because you know what that's going to feel like when you revisit that moment. So we kind of cap ourselves from going back, no matter how much we need to or how much we want to. Any kind of grief or loss signifies that for us. So it's kind of one of those things that you have to really, despite not wanting to, you have to take it heads on. I try to explain it to people in terms of understanding like this. If you got a wound, right? You got a stab wound or a shot wound, you're not going to just let it sit, because then infection sits in and it festers and it can get worse. And instead of just having a simple scar, now you have to lose your whole leg, or you have to lose your whole arm, right? Grief is the
Mm-hmm.
same way. If you don't address it, if you don't heal, if you don't actually clean the wound, it literally will eat you alive from the inside out. It's how people become bitter and jaded and nasty, and you become this whole other person, and you're no longer yourself, right? You're no longer your best self. You're no longer the person you even dreamed of being, that person you feel like is so far away from you. And it's all on account of not addressing the problem at hand.
And I kind of fell into that after, the first time I actually lost someone I cared about. Because I can't say that, not that I didn't care about my grandfather. I was quite young when my grandfather died on my mother's side. Um, and my great grandmother died when I was in high school, but we weren't particularly close, and that still was kind of a loss. But the first time I actually like experienced that feeling of losing somebody was when I first moved to New York City. I had just gotten to my dream school. It was called the New York Conservatory for Dramatic Arts, and it's just this school that all you're doing is film and television and learning how to be on film and television and things like that. And when I first went there, I met this guy named Mike and this girl Kara, and we met in a funny way. We were going downtown to 42nd Street to see, I think it was, oh my God, Kid Cudi. This was back when like Day and Night was out and he was kind of big. He was performing somewhere at Best Buy on 42nd, and everyone went from Brooklyn to go see him. And we end up we couldn't get in because we weren't, there for hours. We didn't have tickets, and we weren't on the VIP list. So we all had to go back to Brooklyn and get home somehow. And we tried to take this subway, but the subway was like, the subway that went to their stop wasn't running. So all the rich kids took cabs to Brooklyn. And from 42nd Street, that's a lot of fucking money. And I didn't have
Yeah.
that, So I was with Kara and Mike, and the three of us decided to, because we kind of said that to each other, because it's kind of embarrassing to talk to people who have money, and you're like, well, I can't do that. So we kind of like took this subway ride to a different stop and just walked towards their house, and we had the best time. We ran to a cop, and like they were like outside singing boom boom pow, whatever. Mike became my best friend, and I always knew that he had some type of mental health issue going on. He would say certain things that normal people wouldn't say if they were happy about something. He would say how unpleasant, life was sometimes, how people in his class made fun of him and things like that. And I always tell him, like, you shouldn't worry about what those assholes say, because half these bitches ain't got talent, and they're really here because they're paying the lights, because that's really why they're here. So it wasn't until one day he asked to try shrooms. And, when he said that, I was like, let me be with you. And the last time I saw him was on a Thursday night, no, a Thursday day. And he was in his usual place when I usually see him at school after a class. He was sitting in the lounge and he was down. And I said, Mike, what's going on? And he's like, it's the kids in my class. And I'm like, remember I said, like, fuck them. And I kind of joke with him. I was kind of like mad about not seeing him one night, whatever, whatnot. And I don't think I should have done that. I guess I don't know. I don't know. But anyways, that's the last time I saw him. And that Friday night, he asked me if I was going to go down to Brooklyn because that's where they're going to do shrooms. And I had this job at Starbucks, and I couldn't do both. I was fucking tired. These bitches had me working all night. And I decided to go home instead of going to Brooklyn to hang out with everyone. And that morning, I found out he jumped out of a window. And
Mm.
after that, school changed for me. You know, I didn't really enjoy being there. I resented his classmates. I resented a lot of people there because I felt like they let that happen. They allowed that to happen because he couldn't have been just being made fun of and no one knew about it, you know. So I kind of handled that wrong. I was crying in class, you know, and I couldn't really. I got to a place where I could learn because I was like, you know what, I'm going to learn this from my friend since he's not here. But I think there's all types of loss that we kind of deal with. Are there any types of other griefs and loss that we've kind of give us in this depressive mood? Like Angelique, you were talking about
But
that
I want to
earlier.
first touch on a.
Go ahead.
Oh, she's a
Can you
little.
guys hear
I
me?
think, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, babe.
Oh my God.
You're good.
Okay, my internet was acting really weird right now. Now I want to touch on a fact where, like you said, you didn't handle it right. I don't think there's a right way to handle grief. I think for everyone it's different, and you do the best you can with what you got. So
Right.
whatever feelings you were feeling, I think were yours and very valid. So I don't think you handled it wrong or right. There's just it just is, and I don't think I don't know. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I
Yeah.
understand exactly what you're trying to say because we were young. I was going to say to you earlier, you know, when you lost your grandfather and, you know, you something you said made me reminded me that there is no right way to teach someone how to, you know, handle grief. There's no real way to teach anyone how to handle any situation in your life, like whether it be the first time someone you lose someone, the first time you have sex with someone. Is no one can teach you that. They can't teach you how you're going to feel because everyone's experience is different, you know. And I think that's the one thing that I love about this show, that we can all talk about our experiences and we realize how they all kind of relate.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I wanted to continue that and say, like, when if anybody's watching this and you're dealing with that particular instance, suicide issues are always tough. Or like me and Shawn were talking, last week on our other show, we were talking to somebody who's a friend of ours who experienced domestic violence. When you hear their stories or you find out what's going on, when it finally comes to that moment where you're facing the truth of somebody else dealing with an issue that is kept within their brain, right? At the end of the day, they're keeping their secrets, they're keeping their lies, they're keeping their truths. They
Hmm.
are they're holding that, and they choose to take an action that is not something you technically agree with, or maybe it's something that you are definitely against. In the event of someone taking their own life, you never can blame yourself. I just need to make that clear. It doesn't even matter if you had a fight before and they blame you for their life. You are not responsible for the actions of someone unless
Yes.
you physically, that's a different subject. But unless you're physically involved, if you're in the moment, even if something happened and you were unable to be the one to like keep that person there, that's not your fault. That's a you're a victim of a circumstance in that instance. But in general, like, that is not for you to hold the weight of that. That is not for you to be a part of. The things that happen to people on a daily basis are universally clipped to this string of events that are tied to their destiny in their life, and you cannot change it. Nothing you would have done or said would have changed that fate. You could have prolonged it, you could have done something, but that person made that decision because in that moment that was the right decision for them. And I don't shame people for suicide, as I don't shame people for making that attempt, even if they succeed or fail at it. I don't shame people for thinking that, because in that moment you were at your lowest, and at that point in time you couldn't take yourself to another level.
Right.
But as people who are in the surrounding, in the what do they call it, in the casualty of the bomb that goes off for that, which shows like 13 Reasons Why, and shows that depict different types of people on that level. That is a loss. That is a grief. That is something that we deal with. We deal with it in many different ways, and you have to understand that that spiral is not one that you need to go down. That spiral is not one that you deserve. There's no amount of grief you feel will ever make you feel equal to another person's loss, or to save them from whatever they thought was best for them. And that's like a thing you have to kind of come to terms with in that aspect. When it comes to the other forms of grief or loss, I mean, depression is linked, although we're all heavily based in loss of life. I think people need to realize that loss in general can cause grief. So whether, you know, you lose a job, you lose a friend, lose custody of a child, whether you lose, you know, a relationship, you know, all of these different things are forms of loss, and you will feel to some degree a form of grief. There's some kind of missive, right? We all have an
Right.
attachment to what they brought to us. Once again, like I said at the beginning of this, you
Mhm.
know, no matter what it is, the thing that you're grieving is not just the physical form of it, but it's the connection you have to it and what it provides for you, or what it provided for you. But I think everybody has to realize at some point or another, there's a part of your life where you live without these things.
Yeah.
Your body goes on without these things and these people. Your life goes on without these things and these people. And although you have a very serious attachment to them, their disappearance in your life, or they're no longer being there physically for you, does not mean, nor does it give you the right to quit. It doesn't mean that things are over. There are other options for people who fall in love and fall out of love. I know people who fall in love every week, and they go through the
Aren't
heartbreak every
they
week.
annoying? Like
But they are some of the most resilient people you will ever meet. They don't let them
resilient or
skip a beat. Listen, however you want to see it, like that's, to me, it's like a train going through concrete brick walls, like on a constant basis, right? It's like you cannot stop them from finding love. They don't care what it takes, what pain they have to feel. They literally need to find love, and they will do whatever it takes. Imagine that. So perfect thing. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. There's a teacher who did this assignment. I watch a lot of motivational help videos, and I watch a lot of stuff. And so there's a teacher who goes into a class and he tells a joke, right? And he tells to students, and everybody uproars laughing, right? And so a couple of minutes later, he tells the joke again, and a couple of kids laugh. Everybody's kind of giggling and snickering. But around the third time he tells the joke, everybody kind of is like, you know. So he's like, he stops and he says, "Isn't it funny that you can you can give up on a joke and give up on your happiness, but when it's time for something to be sad, you can't let it go. You constantly have
absolutely.
to go back to it. You constantly have to relive in that moment. You have to grieve that loss. That loss is something you gotta run around screaming, I lost. I lost. But when you win, you don't run around for weeks screaming, I win, right? You win and then you're
Right.
on to the next win. You don't harp on the win, right? And we kind of get mad at people who harp on the wins, if you think about it, right? We kind of like, all right, shut up, bitch. You won last week. It's all right. It's a new week. We're on. Like, let it go, sis. Let it go. But we're real quick to say that. But when somebody runs around with grief, you feel guilty for telling them to let it go. But that's the
Mhm.
truth. They're holding on to something that no longer serves them, is no longer has a purpose. And I think that the problem people have is, how long do you allow the grief to sit with you? How long do you allow the loss to consume your life? How long do you let it drive the things you do and how you respond to people and how you talk to people? I know for a personal experience, when I lose somebody close to me, I've lost, literally at one point in time, y'all, I thought I was a bad omen. I literally had lost every person I had dated, was either coming up dead or in the hospital. And I was like, don't touch me, don't come near me. Like I look after some of my exes and I'm like praying that I don't catch them in an obituary page. Cause I'd be like, look, if another one of you mother lovers die, I'm just gonna go, Obi-Wan Kenobi my ass into a fucking mountain and just live there by myself. You know, it's very much like that. So I felt like I had something to do with that. I felt like that was my pattern, right? People date me, we fall in love, we end up, and then you end up dead. And I'm like, oh my God.
You're
So
like Rose. You're like Rose from Golden Girls when every time she was sleeping with someone, they died. Like,
yeah, like then again, we're talking about having sex at old age. That's a whole nother thing. But but, uh, but like, that kind of perpetuates an ideology in your head that you're not good enough, or that you don't have it to do, or whatever. And so you have to kind of look at yourself and say, that's not your responsibility. Once again, we don't carry that weight. That's not for us to deal with or do. But just in general, for people to understand where that's coming from, that kind of loss can really set you up. And we are victims of our own mindset. So if we believe something enough, if you strongly believe in it, you're going to manifest it. If you believe that, you do it. And it also comes to like how we talk to ourselves. We're sitting there having this conversation alone rather than with someone else. It makes a difference. And so the way you speak to yourself in your brain, your subconscious hears it and uses it against you. It literally will force you to stick in your cycle if you don't break it. So that's just a food for thought moment. And I think, I mean, it's
absolutely.
relative. Yeah.
Absolutely. I believe in the law of attraction, and that's kind of like how thoughts are energy, and it's like your negative thoughts give you negative energy and your positive thoughts give you positive energy. Like if you think about something, like let's say as simple as if you wake up and you stub your toe and you're like fuck that hurt, and you just keep on thinking about it, you find that everything in during that day, it starts going, really bad for you. So touching on like grief and loss, like, you know, it is a process to experience it. I think the one thing is that getting through it is allowing yourself to experience those emotions, because I think we talked about it earlier in this series that a lot of people in this society doesn't allow people to feel their emotions. You know what I mean? They don't want to feel them, especially men. I think the one thing to get through it is to experience it, and then talk about it with someone who's trained in grief and counseling. Like I remember when my friend died, we had grief counseling. I never took it. I think I should have, but also as well, it's like it's when you start changing your thought, start I would say when you lose someone or you lose something in your life, start remembering the positive things about that person, like what made you happy about them. Like Mike was one of the most talented actors I've ever seen in my life. I thought me and Mike were going to be on a fucking show together. He's so talented, and that's the beautiful thing about him that I always remember, that just brings me back to why I did grieve him so much and why I did love him so much. He was just a great person. That's just my food for thought.
Yeah. Chris, do you have anything extra to add? I know her internet is.
It's a little wonky.
Me,
Yeah.
I want to just jump piggyback off of what you said. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because my internet is just cutting in and out. You guys can hear me fine? Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And if you hear screaming, that's my godson in the background. But I just want to pick it back what Sean said. Um, he said that like he remembers like how talented, what was his name, Mike?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
uh, how talented he was. And I read somewhere once, it reminded me, like I read somewhere that says grief is love, where grief is love with nowhere to go. So like you have all this love that you want to give this person, that you have for this person, but it has nowhere to go anymore. So it's like it's all this grief is love, basically is what the post was saying.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say the line from WandaVision. That's epic. Vision says it to listen. I love Disney, and Disney always has those great one-liners that take you through life. I don't know if anybody else watches, but he says this line. What he says is, "What is grief if not love persevering? What is it if it's not you truly remembering the love that that you've lost? And in terms of life, like I think that in that moment, that is the culmination of your grief, right? Your grief is just that loss. And so to lose someone in physical form is not to lose them forever. I mean, when you're in the middle of your grief, you never want to hear it, but that person is always with you in your heart and your
Mhm.
memories. Unless you catch a case of amnesia, then you're going to always remember, you're going to always have that opportunity to revisit those memories, right? And I think that it's so funny that we look at memories. People have tons of photo albums of children and their youth and the weddings and the birthdays and the important historical moments in their lives, and you use them to showcase your pride in these moments, right? And then
Hmm.
when we lose someone, we kind of look at them and it has a whole nother meaning. But imagine if you looked at them the same way, with that same pride and that same investment you had when you were taking them. What if those pictures took you back to that moment rather than, and reminded you of what you felt in the good side of it rather than the bad side of it? I had this situation personally where I had to give up my old life. I literally lived my life and I did a lot of things that both I loved and I didn't love. And I kept opening up this Facebook page and looking at this life and saying, I don't even know who this person is anymore. When I look at these pictures, it's so funny. People, when I started my transition, you have people who instantly, for some reason, I don't know why, I can't explain it, they instantly want to send you pictures of their favorite moment of you. It's almost as if a plea for you not to change. They're like,
Right.
here's this picture. Do you remember this wild night? Do you remember what this was such a great night? We had so much fun. And I'm like, what you don't realize when you're looking at that picture is that's how you felt about that night. What you don't realize is that I was drinking that night because I felt horrible about myself, and I was trying to keep up with the activities to forget about how I felt. You don't realize when you're shoving that in somebody's face that that's a loss for me. I wasted, in a sense, being, a couple of years being somebody that wasn't true to who I really am.
Mm-hmm.
I lost a whole life, and I have to give that up. It's not just a pain for you that you no longer get to do that. I'm not saying we can't talk about those memories, but I don't want to revisit them. They're painful for me. They hurt me. You know what I mean? At that time when I was going through it. Now, I mean, I look at them and I laugh and I say, yeah, I get it. But people have to understand that that's a grief too. I know you're grieving, but I'm grieving too. I have to bury a whole life. 30 years of my life I have to put inside of a box and send it off to the river, shoot a fire arrow in the sky and let it burn. Like, I had to delete my whole Facebook. I had to go through my Instagram the other day and delete 13 years, I'm sorry, 13 years of pictures that no longer service me. They no longer hold the weight. They no longer hold the space. I have a couple of them that I put aside because I know the people who love me will love those pictures, and they were great moments and things like that. But it's time for me to move on. And
Right.
I can't, like, I explain when I do my counseling sessions to people, when you're dealing with a struggle, right? It's like attaching a tethered weight to your back. And a lot of people think ball and chain, but reality is that whenever we tether something to ourselves, it's more like the rope cord, like bungee cord. And what happens with bungee cord? You can run as far as you want and you'll struggle and it'll be so tight. You think for a second it's going to snap you back, right? The truth is that you never move. The object, though, is going to come flying right back at you, no matter how far you run from it. So deal with your grief, deal with your shit, right? Otherwise, it's going to snap back and pop you. And when it hits you, you're going to be a whole mess. Because the further you get away from it, the harder it's going to hit you. It always feels like it's like going to the gym, right? It always hurts the first time you work out. That first
Right.
workout is always the hardest workout because you push your limits and you like, ooh, that soreness don't come 48 hours. It comes the next day. It's like clockwork, right? But then as you work out more and more, the pain gets a little less, the results get a little bit better. But if you don't go back and handle that, it's gonna hit you so hard, you're not gonna be able to breathe, function, do anything. And it's gonna mess with everything else. It's gonna mess with your whole life. It's gonna mess with your interactions with people. It's gonna mess with how you treat yourself. It's gonna mess with how you speak. You're gonna get easily agitated, anger. Anybody who's suffering from things like that have I don't know how to say it, like untouched, like
Unresolved
they
issues.
yes, there you go.
Like
They have
Yeah.
suppressed feelings and stuff.
yes, because they're not dealing with it. They're not addressing it. They're
Yeah.
ignoring it. They're thinking that they can skip it. It's like all the good movies we watch, right? The person packs their bag, they run away, they move to a new city, they're living good for like 4 or 5 years, and then in comes walking that one person that's gonna blow their house of cards down, right? It only takes one person, one moment, one picture, one song, one something, and the next thing you know, you're back where you were, you know? And so people have to realize, like, if you don't handle your situations head on, you're gonna have to deal with them at some point in time. And I
Absolutely.
advise you not to run from your problems. I advise you not to run from your grief, not to avoid it, but to seek help, to seek solace in others. You don't have to go get a therapist on this one, but you need to go to somebody and express yourself. And what you need is somebody who's gonna listen. You don't need no advice right now, especially in the first couple of days. Like, there's no right or wrong way to handle it. How I handle grief is not how Shawn or how Clarissa handles it. It's not to say that anybody's way is right or wrong, but what works for you works for you. But one thing that will not work for you is running away from it. It's only
Yep.
going to follow you everywhere you're going. I cannot. That's the only thing I can promise to you. That's universal. You cannot run away.
And Clarissa, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it will come and get you. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's just she basically summed it all up. Like, you have to face it head on, no matter how hard it hurts. It's gonna hurt because it's a loss and you're grieving it. So, but you just have to do it. It's necessary, because if not, it's gonna hit you like 20 times harder than it would.
And on that note, not running away from things, like, cause are we all good? Cause I'm gonna end this little segment tonight, cause I think I got a lot out of it, cause I almost cried, cause y'all, because kind of revisiting those things, because like once you stop running away from your grief and deal with it, that's where the healing comes from. Like once I got over, it wasn't my fault, Angelique, that what happened to Mike. It wasn't because I wasn't there. If he had those feelings, he's going to do that. Then after that, there were some other losses I've had, and those aren't your fault. You have to kind of take a step back at things. Take a step back. That's my advice on things. Take a step back at things because then you get a certain perspective of looking at things outside yourself in that situation so you can look at it and kind of see where you can heal. But anywho, and not running away from things. I'm in this because we're gonna be back tomorrow night with our hot topic show, and we have a lot of things to talk about. What's going on in Florida? I do not want to run away from these bills that they're trying to do. There's a lot of crazy shit about not allowing people to talk about their gender and sexual orientation if that's being discussed in the classroom. I think that's going to lead to a lot of mental health issues, and we can't run away from this. We have to like stand here and fight. If we're going to sit here and say that we need all these rights, well, when it happens, we have to be there for the fight. All right.
Right.
I'll see you guys tomorrow night, and we're gonna have some fun. We're out. Crystal Voss, Orlando-based drag performer, is joining us. And thank you so much, Clarissa, for being with us and sharing your story and your experience.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Please, we'll have to come back, and we'll see you again. And to everyone else, good night